Hey everyone, Sarah here. Rewind Justice brings you revenge stories that will blow your mind. If you're ready, hit subscribe and let's go.
Parents sued me for $4.7 million in court. I'm the one who paid their mortgage since 2019. She manipulated our father and stole our inheritance. Declared in court, demanding $4.70 million. The judge, her friend, nodded sympathetically. Dad added, "She's always been selfish." I opened my briefcase. Your Honor, 48 months of mortgage receipts. All paid by me. The judge turned pale. The courtroom was packed with relatives I hadn't seen in years. They'd all shown up for the spectacle, watching my parents publicly destroy me in front of Judge Patricia Henderson, Mom's college roommate and tennis partner for the past 30 years. The odds were stacked. The outcome seemed predetermined. Everyone was waiting for me to break. I sat perfectly still at the defendant's table, hands folded, expression neutral. My attorney, David Chin, had his briefcase positioned between us. Inside were 48 months of documentation that would change everything. But we weren't rushing. Not yet. Let me back up and explain how I ended up here, being sued by my own parents for an inheritance I supposedly stole from my grandfather's estate. Growing up, the family hierarchy was crystal clear. My older brother Marcus was the golden child. Harvard MBA investment banking career, married to a surgeon, 2 perfect children, country club membership. He was everything my parents had ever wanted. Then there was me, Emma. The disappointment. I'd chosen a lesser path according to family standards. While Marcus climbed corporate ladders, I'd gone into government contract work after college. Boring. Unglamorous. Safe. My parents never missed an opportunity to compare us at family gatherings. Marcus just closed another multi-million-dollar deal, Dad would announce at Thanksgiving. "That's wonderful," I'd reply, cutting my turkey. "What about you, Emma?" "Still doing that administrative work." "Contract analysis, Dad." "Yes. Still doing that." Mom would sigh dramatically. "Such wasted potential. You had the same opportunities as your brother." What they didn't know, what I'd deliberately hidden from them for years, was that my boring government work involved analyzing and negotiating federal contracts worth hundreds of millions of dollars. I held a top-secret security clearance. I worked with defense contractors, infrastructure projects, and technology initiatives that most people would never hear about. By age 28, I was making $340,000 a year. By 30, I'd been headhunted by a private sector consulting firm for $580,000 plus bonuses. At 32, I'd started my own government contract consulting company that brought in $2.1 million in annual revenue. But my parents thought I was a low-level clerk making maybe $55,000 a year. I let them think it. I had my reasons. My grandfather, William Hayes, was different from my parents. He'd built a successful commercial real estate business from nothing, and he understood the value of quiet competence over flashy displays. While my parents fawned over Marcus's every achievement, Grandpa noticed who actually showed up. I visited him every Sunday at his assisted living facility. We'd play chess, discuss politics, talk about his business deals from the 1970s and 80s. Marcus visited maybe 3 times a year, always with a photographer to capture the moment for his social media. Quality time with Grandpa. #family first, #blessed. When Grandpa was diagnosed with stage 4 pancreatic cancer in early 2019, I rearranged my entire schedule to be there. I attended every doctor's appointment, managed his medications, handled his business affairs as his health declined. Marcus sent a fruit basket. One afternoon in April 2019, Grandpa asked me to stay after the nurse left. "Emma, I need to talk to you about something important," he said, his voice weak but clear. "I'm revising my estate plan." "Grandpa, you don't need to. Listen to me." He gripped my hand with surprising strength. "I'm leaving the Florida property portfolio to you. All 9 properties. They're worth approximately $5.8 million currently, but the market's appreciating. In 10 years they could be worth $12 million or more." I stared at him. "Grandpa, Marcus is the eldest. Mom and Dad expect." "I don't care what they expect. Marcus has never needed help. You, on the other hand." He smiled knowingly. "You've been taking care of things quietly while everyone else takes credit. I see that. I've always seen it. But this will cause problems. Huge problems. Then don't tell them until after I'm gone." In fact, I have a better idea. He outlined a plan that at the time seemed overly cautious. Now, sitting in this courtroom, I realized he'd known exactly what would happen. The properties would be transferred to a trust with me as the sole beneficiary and trustee. The transfer would happen immediately while he was alive, not through the will. It would be legally airtight and completely separate from his probate estate. My parents and Marcus would inherit everything else. His stock portfolio, retirement accounts, personal property, and the family house in Connecticut. Total value, approximately $2.3 million. But here's the thing, Emma, Grandpa continued. Your parents' house, the one they're living in right now, it's mortgaged. They refinanced 5 years ago to fund Marcus's business venture. They owe $470,000. The payments are $3,200 a month. I didn't know that. They don't advertise their financial problems the way they advertise their successes. When I die, they'll get money, but not enough to pay off that mortgage and maintain their lifestyle. They're going to struggle. My chest tightened. What should I do? That's up to you. But Emma, if you help them, do it anonymously. Don't let them know it's you. Because the moment they know you have money, they'll treat you differently and not in a good way. Grandpa died 3 weeks later on May 12, 2019. I was holding his hand. At the funeral, Marcus gave a beautiful eulogy about how much Grandpa meant to him. Mom and Dad wept elegantly. Everyone praised the Hayes family legacy. I sat in the back row and said nothing. The will reading happened a week later. As expected, everything in Grandpa's probate estate was divided between my parents and Marcus. The Florida properties weren't mentioned because they'd already been transferred to my trust. Nobody noticed. Nobody asked. But I noticed something else during those weeks after the funeral. Mom looked stressed. Dad was snippier than usual. I overheard them talking about cash flow problems and mortgage payment timing. I did some discreet research. They'd refinanced their house 5 years ago for $470,000 at 4.2% interest. Monthly payment, $3,200. They'd been using Grandpa's regular financial help to make the payments. Now that help was gone and they were panicking. I thought about what Grandpa said. About helping anonymously. So I created a system. Through a series of legal entities and payment processing companies, I set up automatic mortgage payments on their house. The payments appeared to come from Hayes Estate Services LLC, which technically existed, but was just a shell company I controlled. To my parents, it looked like some kind of continuing estate arrangement, maybe something Grandpa had set up before he died. They never questioned it. They just accepted that somehow, magically, their mortgage was being paid. I paid $3,200 every single month from June 2019 forward. For years. 48 payments. Total, $153,600. I never told them. I never asked for gratitude. I just did it because Grandpa was right, they needed help and I could provide it. Meanwhile, my own career was exploding. My consulting firm landed a $12 million federal contract in 2020. By 2021, we'd expanded to 18 employees. By 2022, annual revenue hit $4.8 million. I'd personally accumulated a net worth of approximately $3.2 million through smart investments and the Florida property portfolio, which had appreciated to $6.4 million. My parents still thought I was a low-level clerk. At Christmas 2022, Mom actually gave me a $50 Target gift card, because I know money is tight for you, sweetie. I smiled and thanked her. Everything changed in February 2023. Marcus's wife filed for divorce. The proceedings were ugly. During asset discovery, her lawyers started pulling financial records, and they found references to Grandpa's estate, the Florida properties, and the trust transfer from 2019. Marcus called me on a Tuesday evening, voice tight with rage. Did you steal Grandpa's real estate portfolio? Excuse me. The Florida properties. 9 properties worth over $6 million. Diane's lawyers found records showing they were transferred to some trust in 2019. Right before Grandpa died. Did you manipulate him? My stomach dropped. Marcus, Grandpa transferred those properties to me legally. He wanted. Bullshit. You manipulated a dying old man. You probably convinced him we didn't care about him. You stole our inheritance, Emma. That's not what happened. Grandpa made his own decisions. We're getting lawyers. You're not keeping that money. He hung up. Within 48 hours my parents called. Mom was crying. Dad was cold. How could you do this to us? Mom sobbed. After everything we've done for you? I didn't do anything wrong. Grandpa wanted me to have. You manipulated your dying grandfather, Dad cut in. You took advantage of him when he was weak. That money should have been divided among the family. It wasn't in his will because he'd already transferred it years ago. It was his property. His choice. We're taking you to court, Dad said flatly. We're suing for the full value of those properties plus damages for emotional distress and fraudulent interference with inheritance rights. Our lawyer says we have a strong case. Dad, please. You have 1 week to agree to return the properties and split them appropriately. If you don't, we file. Emma? Judge Henderson is hearing the case. She's your mother's best friend. Think carefully about how this plays out. The threat was clear. They'd stacked the deck. They expected me to fold immediately. Instead, I called David Chin, the best litigation attorney in the state. They're suing you for $4.7 million? David said after reviewing the demand letter. Based on what legal theory? Undue influence, fraud, elder exploitation. They're claiming I manipulated Grandpa when he was dying. But the properties were transferred 4 months before he died, and you have medical records showing he was completely competent at the time, correct? Correct. And they're trying this in front of Judge Henderson, who's your mother's close personal friend? Correct. David was quiet for a moment. Emma, I need to know something. Do you have any leverage we're not aware of? Anything that could shift the dynamic? I thought about those 48 mortgage payments. $153,600 that my parents had no idea I'd paid. Actually, yes. I have quite a bit of leverage. Over the next 3 months, David and I prepared meticulously. We gathered the original trust documents showing Grandpa's clear intent and legal capacity. Medical records from April 2019 proving Grandpa was mentally competent. Video recordings from the assisted living facility showing our conversations. Testimony from Grandpa's attorney confirming no undue influence. Financial records showing Grandpa's deliberate planning. But the nuclear option, the evidence we'd only use if absolutely necessary, was the mortgage payment documentation. Every payment. Every bank record. Every wire transfer confirmation. If they push this to trial, David advised, we can introduce this evidence to show their actual financial dependence on you, which undermines their claim that you're the exploitative family member. But Emma, understand this will destroy your relationship with them permanently. They're already suing me for nearly $5 million. The relationship is already destroyed. Fair point. The lawsuit was filed in April 2023. My parents were claiming $4.7 million in property value that should have been properly divided. $500,000 in emotional distress damages. $200,000 in legal fees. Punitive damages, to be determined. The local press picked up the story. Family sues daughter over inheritance dispute. Marcus gave an interview painting me as a manipulative villain who'd taken advantage of our dying grandfather. My parents played the victims perfectly, betrayed by their ungrateful daughter. I said nothing publicly. I just worked with David and waited. The courtroom was packed on the morning of September 18, 2023. I recognized relatives I hadn't seen since childhood, all there to watch my public destruction. Judge Henderson entered, tall, severe, wearing the same expression I'd seen in photos from Mom's tennis tournaments. She looked at my mother and smiled slightly. They'd probably had coffee that morning. My parents' attorney, Gerald Whitmore, was a theatrical litigator known for emotional appeals. He started strong. Your Honor, this case is about exploitation of the most vulnerable among us. The plaintiff's father, William Hayes, was a sick, dying man when the defendant, his own granddaughter, manipulated him into signing over $4.7 million in real estate assets. She isolated him, convinced him his family didn't care, and exploited his weakened mental state for personal gain. He painted a picture of me as a scheming villain. He showed photos of Grandpa in his final weeks, looking frail and weak, implying I'd taken advantage of him in that condition, even though the transfer had happened months earlier when he was still strong. Then Mom took the stand. He was perfect. Tearful but composed. Heartbroken but dignified. My father loved all of us equally, she testified. He never would have cut out Marcus and his grandchildren if he'd been thinking clearly. Emma must have poisoned him against us. She was always there, always in his ear, while the rest of us were busy with our lives. And how has this affected you financially? Whitmore asked. It's been devastating. My father intended for those properties to help support our family. We've struggled significantly. There were times we weren't sure we could keep our house. I wanted to laugh. They weren't sure they could keep their house because I was literally paying their mortgage for them. Dad testified next. More restrained but equally effective. Emma was always the difficult child, he said. Always secretive. Always resentful of her brother's success. I think she saw an opportunity to finally win by manipulating her grandfather. Judge Henderson nodded sympathetically throughout both testimonies. Then it was Marcus's turn. Grandpa promised me those properties, he lied smoothly. He said they'd be part of my children's legacy. Emma knew that. She deliberately cut out my kids, her own niece and nephew. Whitmore submitted their evidence. The trust documents which they claimed proved manipulation, character witnesses, relatives who barely knew Grandpa, and a hired expert who claimed the timing of the transfer was suspicious. Then Whitmore delivered his closing argument for the plaintiff's case. Your Honor, the defendant sits there silently because she knows she's been caught. She exploited a dying man. She stole from her own family. We're asking this court to right this terrible wrong and restore these properties to their rightful heirs. The courtroom murmured approval. Several relatives nodded. Judge Henderson looked at me with barely concealed disdain. Does the defense wish to present its case? David stood. We do, Your Honor. David started methodically. He presented the medical records showing Grandpa's mental competency. He showed the timeline proving the transfer happened 4 months before Grandpa's decline. He called Grandpa's estate attorney, who testified that William Hayes had been absolutely clear and deliberate in his wishes. Mr. Hayes specifically told me, Emma takes care of things. She shows up. I want her to have the Florida portfolio because she'll manage it responsibly. Those were his exact words. David played video footage from the assisted living facility. Conversations between me and Grandpa about chess, politics, his business philosophy. In every clip, Grandpa was sharp, engaged, clearly in control of his faculties. This was not a man being manipulated, David argued. This was a man making informed decisions about his own property. But I could see Judge Henderson's expression hadn't changed. She was still looking at me like I was guilty. The friendship with my mother was too strong. The bias was clear. We needed the nuclear option. During a brief recess, I told David, use the mortgage payments. All of it. Emma, are you sure? I'm sure. They want to claim I exploited the family? Let's show who actually exploited whom. When court resumed, David stood. Your Honor, the plaintiffs have painted Ms. Hayes as an exploitative family member who cares only about money. We'd like to present evidence that tells a very different story. He approached the bench with a thick folder. What is this? Judge Henderson asked. Bank records, Your Honor. Wire transfer confirmations. Mortgage payment receipts. All showing that for the past 48 months, the defendant has been anonymously paying her parents' mortgage. The courtroom went silent. Mom's face drained of color. Dad looked confused, then horrified as understanding hit. I don't understand, Judge Henderson said, flipping through the documents. Allow me to clarify, David continued. The plaintiffs testified about their financial struggles. What they didn't mention is that since June 2019, 1 month after William Hayes died, the defendant has been paying their entire mortgage. $3,200 per month. 48 consecutive payments. Total, $153,600. He submitted the records into evidence. Every payment was documented. Every wire transfer tracked. The shell company traced back to me. The payments were made through a legal entity to appear as though they came from the estate, David explained. Ms. Hayes did this to help her parents quietly without embarrassment, just as her grandfather suggested. She asked for nothing in return. She never mentioned it. She simply paid their bills while they sued her for millions. Judge Henderson stared at the documents. For the first time, her confident expression wavered. Your Honor, David continued, I'd like Ms. Hayes to testify. I took the stand. My hands were steady. David asked straightforward questions. I answered truthfully. Why did you pay their mortgage anonymously? My grandfather told me they were struggling. He suggested I help them quietly without them knowing because he thought it would be easier for everyone. Did you ever ask them for repayment? No. Did you ever tell them you were doing this? No. During the 4 years you paid their mortgage, $153,600, did they ever thank you? They didn't know it was me. And during those same 4 years, how did they treat you? I thought about the Christmas gift cards, the constant comparisons to Marcus, the dismissive comments about my boring government work. They treated me the way they always had. As a disappointment. David turned to Judge Henderson. Your Honor, who is the exploitative party here? The daughter who silently paid her parents' bills for 4 years while hiding her own success? Or the parents who are now suing that daughter for millions while accepting her financial support? Judge Henderson looked at my mother. Mrs. Hayes, did you know your daughter was paying your mortgage? Mom's mouth opened and closed. No sound came out. Answer the question, the judge said sharply. No. I didn't know. You testified that you struggled to keep your house. But in fact, your daughter ensured you'd never lose it. Correct. I didn't know it was her. That wasn't my question. The courtroom was absolutely silent. You could hear people breathing. Judge Henderson turned to my father. Mr. Hayes, you testified that your daughter was always secretive and resentful. Does it seem resentful to you that she paid $153,600 to keep you in your home? Dad said nothing. His face was red. Then David played his final card. Your Honor, we'd also like to submit Ms. Hayes' financial records showing her actual career success. She runs a government contract consulting firm with annual revenue of $4.8 million. Her personal net worth is approximately $3.2 million, independent of the inherited properties. She's built all of this through her own work, while her family dismissed her as a failure. He showed my tax returns, my company's revenue reports, my client list, including several Fortune 500 companies and federal agencies. The courtroom gasped. I saw relatives whispering in shock. Marcus looked like he'd been slapped. David's closing argument was surgical. Your Honor, this case is not about inheritance exploitation. It's about a family that completely misjudged one of their own and now wants to profit from that misjudgment. William Hayes knew exactly what he was doing when he gave those properties to his granddaughter. He saw what everyone else in this family refused to see. Emma Hayes is competent, successful, and generous. She didn't manipulate anyone. She earned her grandfather's trust by being the one person who showed up without expectation of reward. The plaintiffs want $4.7 million from someone who's already given them over $150,000 and asked for nothing in return. This lawsuit is not justice. It's exploitation of the exact person they've already exploited emotionally for years. Judge Henderson took a 20-minute recess. When she returned, her expression was cold. I've reviewed the evidence presented by both parties. The court finds the following. First, the trust transfer was legally valid. William Hayes was of sound mind, properly advised by counsel, and acted of his own free will. There is no evidence of undue influence or manipulation by the defendant. Second, the plaintiff's claim of financial devastation is undermined by the fact that the defendant has been supporting them financially for 4 years without their knowledge or gratitude. Third, the plaintiffs have presented no credible evidence that William Hayes intended the properties to be divided among the family. The evidence shows he specifically intended them for the defendant. Therefore, the court finds in favor of the defendant on all counts. The lawsuit is dismissed with prejudice. He paused, looking directly at my parents. Furthermore, I'm sanctioning the plaintiffs for bringing a frivolous lawsuit. They will pay the defendant's legal fees in the amount of $127,000. Additionally, I'm ordering them to immediately repay the $153,600 in mortgage payments the defendant made on their behalf, since they clearly don't want her financial assistance. My mother gasped. Your Honor, we can't. You should have thought about that before suing your daughter. You have 90 days to arrange payment, or I'll authorize wage garnishment and asset seizure. The gavel came down. The courtroom cleared quickly. Relatives avoided eye contact with me. Marcus stormed out without a word. My parents approached with their attorney, both looking shell-shocked. Emma, Mom started. We didn't know. You didn't want to know, I said quietly. You were so convinced I was a failure that you never bothered to actually look at my life. We're sorry, Dad said, but his voice lacked conviction. He was calculating, I could see it. How to minimize the financial damage. How to spin this. You have 90 days to pay me $280,600, I said. The legal fees plus the mortgage payments. I'll send wire transfer instructions through my attorney. We don't have that kind of money, Liquid, Dad protested. Then sell something. Refinance. I don't care. You wanted to take $4.7 million from me. You can manage $280,600. I walked away from them. David was waiting by the door. That was impressive, he said. Thanks. Send me your final bill. Already included in the court-ordered fees. Your parents are covering it. I almost smiled. Almost. My parents paid the $280,600 in 3 installments over 90 days. They had to liquidate some of Grandpa's stock inheritance to do it. Marcus had to loan them $80,000. They've tried reaching out a few times. Emails mostly. We should talk. We miss you. Family is family. I haven't responded. Marcus's divorce was finalized. He lost half his assets and pays $12,000 a month in child support. He's had to sell the country club membership. I started a scholarship fund in Grandpa's name. $50,000 a year for students pursuing careers in contract law, government service, or public policy. The quiet fields. The undervalued paths. The Florida property portfolio is now worth $7.1 million. I've kept all 9 properties, renting them out for steady income. One of them is a small beach house in Naples that I use twice a year. I sit on the deck with a glass of wine and think about Grandpa. He knew exactly what would happen if he'd left those properties in his will. He knew my family would fight over them, claim them, demand their fair share. So he gave them to me quietly, legally, irrevocably, and he was right to do it. My company hit $6.2 million in revenue this year. I hired 3 more employees. I'm being profiled in Government Executive magazine next month about innovative contracting solutions. My parents will probably see the article. They'll probably realize once again how completely they misjudged me. I don't do this work for their validation anymore. I don't pay mortgages to earn their love. I don't hide my success to make them comfortable. I do it because Grandpa saw something in me that they never did. Quiet competence, strategic thinking, and the strength to stand alone when necessary. At the trial, when Judge Henderson asked who the exploitative party was, I saw my mother's face change. For just a moment she understood. She'd spent years dismissing me, pitying me, treating me like a charity case, while I was literally keeping the roof over her head. That moment of recognition was worth more than any apology she could give now. I don't need them anymore. I never really did. But they needed me. They just refused to see it until a judge made them look.